Before Ed Wood begins telling its story, it submerges us. The film opens in darkness. Graveyards, fog, strange movement through unstable space. And the camera doesn't feel like it's guiding us toward certainty. It feels like we're already drifting inside something. The movement is slow, but never still. Almost like the film is lowering us beneath ordinary orientation, into a different perceptual atmosphere. And what's striking is that the darkness doesn't initially feel oppressive. It feels exploratory, sheltering, strange, alive with possibility. The film doesn't ask us, what does this mean? Not yet. Instead, it asks something quieter. What kind of world does creation move through? And then we descend beneath the surface. The underwater movement changes everything. Sound feels different. Rhythm feels different. Orientation begins loosening. The film no longer feels completely anchored to ordinary physical space. It feels submerged inside sensation. And then the octopus appears. Not as a monster exactly, more like an encounter. Something living, ancient, beautiful, slightly dangerous. Difficult to fully stabilize emotionally. And what feels important is that the film allows all of those truths to exist together. Wonder and instability, attraction and uncertainty, beauty and danger. Nothing has been flattened into a simple emotional instruction yet. Even the movement itself keeps changing. The living octopus moves fluidly through the water, while the tentacle, well, that movement feels stranger, more constructed, more deliberate, animated through interruption rather than flow. But the film doesn't completely reject either kind of movement. If anything, the montage seems fascinated by movement itself. Living movement, artificial movement, dream movement, mechanical movement, the strange ways images can be brought to life. And then suddenly, the film rises back upward, out of the water, into open space, into movement that almost feels exhilarating. A flying saucer drifting across the sky. The montage keeps transforming before the viewer can fully stabilize inside any one emotional state. And maybe that's why the opening feels less like a puzzle and more like a descent. We are not being asked to solve the movement yet, only to enter it. There's a feeling that appears early in Ed Wood before the film's deeper pressures begin closing around him. A kind of openness, like imagination is still allowed to move freely. Early in the film, Ed wanders through the studio backlot, and suddenly he stops.
Wow, there's a camera. These are real cameras.
What's striking is how quickly the moment takes hold of him. Peter O'Toole is standing only a few feet away, and Ed barely seems to notice. His attention goes immediately to the animals themselves, their movement, their presence, the sudden feeling that something distant and cinematic has become real. and the film moves through the moment lightly, almost playfully. It doesn't stop to explain why the camels matter. We just watch Ed become briefly illuminated by them. That feeling keeps returning during these early sequences. Images arriving, imagination igniting, possibility opening faster than it can fully stabilize. A little later, Ed is watching old stock footage. Buffalo stampeding across the screen, an octopus moving through underwater darkness. And almost immediately, you can feel something happening inside him. The images don't seem distant to Ed. They don't feel discarded, or forgotten, or archival. They feel alive, like they're already in motion toward becoming something else. You can actually watch his imagination accelerate.
The story opens on these mysterious explosions. Nobody knows what's causing them, but it's upsetting all the buffalo. So the military are called in to solve the mystery.
You forgot the octopus.
No, I'm saving that for my big underwater climax.
A creature becomes a movie. A fragment becomes momentum. One possibility opens the door to another. The movement is so fast, so instinctive, that it almost bypasses conscious thought entirely. And what makes these scenes feel so beautiful is that the film allows this imaginative propulsion to exist before it becomes burdened, before rejection changes its chemistry, before movement starts carrying survival pressure inside of it. Right now, the imagination still feels ecstatic, not controlled, not strategic, not yet mechanized, just alive. But maybe part of what makes moments like this feel so fragile is how briefly we're ever allowed to live inside them. The feeling that movement will simply continue, carrying us forward forever. That possibility will always remain this open, this effortless. And maybe that's part of what Ed Wood understands so deeply. That before movement becomes desperate, it first feels illuminating. This is Beneath the Frame, where we take a closer look at how film creates deeper meaning. For a while, it feels like movement will simply keep opening new doors. One possibility leads to another. One image becomes a movie. One encounter becomes momentum. The world feels full of things waiting to be discovered. And maybe that's part of what makes the next shift feel so important. Because nothing dramatic actually happens. The world doesn't suddenly become hostile. The imagination doesn't disappear. The movement doesn't stop. It simply encounters something it cannot move through. Ed walks into Screen Classics, carrying the same possibility we've been feeling throughout these early sequences. The same optimism, the same belief that movement will eventually create an opening. And for the first time, it doesn't. The rejection itself is almost surprisingly ordinary. No villain, no cruelty, no dramatic collapse, just a door that doesn't open.
Ed, you seem like a nice kid. Look around you. I don't hire directors with burning desires to tell their stories. I make movies like Chain Girls. I need someone with experience who can shoot a film in 4 days and make me a profit. Sorry, that's all that matters.
And what makes the moment feel painful isn't the rejection alone. It's the doubt that follows it. Because once doubt enters, movement changes. Not externally, internally. The imagination is still there. The longing is still there. The possibility is still there. But something about the movement no longer feels effortless. For the first time, possibility begins feeling precious. Afterward, Ed drifts into a bar, and the energy of the film changes almost immediately. The movement hasn't disappeared, but it feels suspended, searching without quite knowing where to go next. It's a feeling many of us probably recognize. That moment after something important doesn't happen. When the world keeps moving, but your own movement no longer feels entirely certain. And maybe that's why this section matters so much. Not because it introduces failure, but because it introduces fragility. The wonder is still alive, the possibility is still alive, the desire to move forward is still alive, but now, for the first time, they no longer feel guaranteed. And once movement becomes fragile, something else becomes possible. And then something changes. Not because the doubt disappears, not because the rejection suddenly stops mattering, but because movement finds another person inside it. Ed meets Bela Lugosi, and almost immediately, the emotional atmosphere of the film begins changing. The energy returns, the curiosity returns, the feeling that possibility might still be waiting somewhere just beyond the next doorway. And what makes the encounter feel so powerful is that it never feels transactional. It feels human. Bella talks. Ed listens. Bella remembers. And Ed marvels. And for a while, the film seems almost completely uninterested in where any of this is leading. It simply allows the connection to exist. There's a warmth to these scenes that feels difficult to miss, not because either of them is standing in a position of strength, but perhaps because neither of them is. Bella has already experienced the machinery of Hollywood, the way it can elevate people, and the way it can forget them. And Ed is only just beginning to encounter those same forces himself. But in this moment, none of that feels like the center of the scene. The center of the scene feels much simpler. Recognition. The feeling of finding someone who understands something you care about. Someone who speaks the same language. Someone who makes movement feel possible again. And maybe that's why the encounter feels so important, because for the first time in the film, movement no longer belongs to Ed alone. It becomes shared. And the possibilities feel larger. The excitement feels larger. Even the future begins feeling larger. And honestly, it's not hard to understand why. After all, this is the first time since possibility became fragile that it feels close enough to touch again. Close enough to believe in. close enough to follow. And perhaps that's why one small moment later in the scene feels so easy to miss. Bella talks about how Hollywood abandoned him, how no one uses him anymore. And almost immediately, Ed says,
He treated me like a friend.
the gratitude feels genuine. The excitement feels genuine. The friendship feels genuine too. And yet, something about the moment lingers. Not because the friendship feels false, but because possibility has begun carrying a different kind of weight. The same encounter that reanimates movement also quietly begins changing its chemistry. Not enough, perhaps, to fully notice. Not yet, but enough to feel. Something interesting begins happening after Bella enters the film. The movement doesn't simply return, it grows. New projects appear.
Fine. Shoot whatever baloney you want, just make sure it's 7 reels long.
New people appear. New possibilities seem to arrive faster than anyone can fully keep up with them. Someone rejects a project.
Dracula. I don't like it.
Ed pitches another one.
Bride of the Atom. I like it.
One possibility
Really?
disappears.
Worst film you ever saw?
Another immediately takes its place.
Well, my next one will be better.
The line is funny,
Hello?
maybe even inspiring.
Hello?
And honestly,
Hey! Cops!
it works. The movement
We don't have a
keeps
permit.
surviving. Throughout the film, people keep finding themselves pulled into that movement. Actors, investors,
I want the movie to end with a big explosion.
friends,
Do you reject Satan and all his evils?
Sure.
even people who probably should know better. Someone gets recruited.
Miss Vampira. Please.
Someone gets convinced.
I have 5 days to complete this picture. Don't get goofy on me.
Someone follows Ed's momentum through a doorway. Then someone else follows. And after a while, it starts becoming difficult to tell whether people are following Ed or following the movement itself, because the momentum has become contagious. And often, it's absurd. An investor wants a role in the movie.
No. No water. No liquids. I'm terribly allergic to them.
Someone else somehow agrees to appear in it.
Eddie, what kind of a movie is this?
Ed needs transvestites.
Get me transvestites. I need transvestites.
The movie somehow keeps moving forward anyway.
Somebody misplaced the octopus motor. So when you get in there and fight with him, shake his legs around. It looks like he's killing you. You flying saucer?
The impossibilities don't stop the movement. They become part of it. And for a while, that absurdity feels almost magical.
It's uncanny.
Because movement keeps turning dead ends into doorways. Problems appear.
They're driving me crazy!
The movement absorbs them. Obstacles appear. The movement finds another route. Something falls
Cheer up.
apart.
Don't lose heart over what happened tonight.
The movement keeps
I
going.
predict your next project will be an outstanding success.
And gradually, almost without noticing it, the emotional chemistry begins changing. Earlier in the film, possibility felt open Now it feels important, necessary even. There never seems to be enough time. A project needs funding. A role needs filling. A film needs finishing. Time keeps moving. Clocks begin appearing. Watches begin appearing. Schedules, deadlines, production problems. The movement is still exciting, still funny, still full of possibility, but it is beginning to acquire weight. One moment in particular feels difficult to ignore. Dolores asks how much money someone invested in the film.
How much money did he put up?
None. But his dad gave me 50 grand.
Wood production's the mark of quality.
And Ed's response arrives almost immediately.
Listen, the movie's getting made. That's all that matters.
It's a strange line. Not because it feels cynical. It doesn't. It feels sincere. And maybe that's what makes it linger. Because the movement is no longer simply carrying possibility. It is beginning to carry necessity. The film still feels alive. The moment still feels intoxicating. The wonder is still there. But something else is forming beneath it now. Not visible enough to fully name. Not yet. Just a growing sense that the movement no longer wants to stop. Up until now, the movement has felt almost unstoppable. Every setback becomes another pitch. Every obstacle becomes another solution. Every closed door seems to open into another one. And honestly, it's difficult not to admire it. The momentum feels creative, generous, alive. It creates films. It creates friendships. It creates possibilities that shouldn't exist. For a while, the movement almost feels like freedom. But somewhere beneath all that momentum, something else has been forming. Not a villain, not a conspiracy, not some hidden force operating outside the movement. The pressure is emerging from the movement itself. Because the same momentum that keeps rescuing possibility never seems to stop moving. A problem appears, the movement solves it. Another appears, the movement solves that too. Another opportunity, another production, another person, another possibility. And gradually, the rhythm beneath the movement begins becoming visible. Clocks appear, watches appear, schedules, deadlines, production problems. Not because time suddenly matters, because we're finally starting to notice it. The movement is still creating wonder, but the wonder no longer seems completely free. The movement is still creating connection, but the connections are beginning to feel fragile. The movement is still creating possibility, but possibility is beginning to feel necessary. And necessity changes things. Not all at once, not dramatically, not always enough to fully see, just enough to feel. A friend talks about how Hollywood abandoned Bella, how nobody uses him anymore.
It's a shame. He's such a great actor and no one uses him anymore.
So did you get his autograph?
No, it wasn't like that at all. It was just the two of us, and we were talking, and he treated me like a friend.
And somehow that feeling lingers. Not because the friendship isn't real, it is. Not because the wonder isn't real, it is. Not because the movement isn't real, it is. But because the movement is beginning to pull everything it touches into itself. The wonder, the friendships, the possibilities, even the things that once felt separate from the movement. And for the first time, the audience begins sensing something unsettling. The movement that once felt like freedom may be carrying a kind of pressure inside it. Not enough to stop it, not yet, but enough to wonder where it's taking everyone. When we first entered Ed Wood, movement simply felt alive. A camel on a studio lot, an octopus drifting through underwater darkness, old stock footage opening into possibility. Possibility seemed to open naturally into more possibility. One doorway into another, one idea into another, one movement into another. And for a while, it was easy to simply enjoy the momentum, maybe even trust it. But as the film continued, something slowly changed. Not because the movement disappeared, because we began noticing it. We watched it create friendships, films, opportunities, worlds. We watched it keep turning dead ends into doorways. We watched it make uncertainty survivable. And perhaps most importantly, we watched it pull people together. But somewhere along the way, another realization began forming. The things movement creates are fragile.
These movies are terrible!
Wonder is fragile. Possibility is fragile. Connection is fragile. And suddenly, the movement that once felt like freedom began carrying pressure inside it. Not because movement is destructive, the film never quite argues that, but because movement is powerful. Powerful enough to create worlds, and powerful enough to shape the people living inside them. By the end of the film, the question no longer feels like, why do these characters keep moving? It begins feeling more like, what kinds of worlds are being created by the way they move? And maybe that's the realization we're carrying back to the surface. Movement isn't merely something people do. It's something that gradually builds the spaces they inhabit, the relationships they form, the possibilities they can imagine, and perhaps even the futures they become capable of reaching. So, when you watch Ed Wood, where did you notice movement beginning to change? Were there moments where possibility felt alive for its own sake? Or moments where it began carrying a different kind of weight? Or have you encountered another film where movement itself seems to shape the world around it? Not just physically, but emotionally. What do you think might be happening beneath the frame?